Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ricardo, and I'm here today to talk to you about why nuclear power is the best power. Now, this is actually a subject very near and dear to my heart, as I am a huge fan of Iron Man. I spent a lot of time studying the arc reactor, and that's something I'd like to share with you today. Now, what you're seeing here is your typical nuclear fission power plant. The way that nuclear fission reactions work, and I'm just going to give you the basic rundown. You take heavy elements that have unstable isotopes, such as uranium and plutonium, very good candidates for nuclear fission reactions. When they interact with photons, they'll easily break down into lighter, more stable elements, and in the process, will give off significant levels of energy. Now, this energy can be used to do anything from power your house to destroy a city in the blink of an eye. It really depends on what you do with it. And that's one of the reasons a lot of people find themselves against the idea of using nuclear energy. They're afraid of its harmful effects. And although we have a lot more safety measures than we did in the previous years, that allow us to kind of control the natural instabilities of nuclear energy, it's still a huge concern for a lot of people, and rightly so. Uh, One of the great dangers when it comes to nuclear fission reactions is what's called a chain reaction. Now, generally, the way that a nuclear fission power plant will work, you'll have several pellets of uranium or plutonium reacting side by side with each other, releasing photons and packets of energy around each other, causing one another to react further. Is one of the reasons it's so cheap to, initiate and sustain nuclear fission reactions. But if this isn't controlled properly through the use of coolant, then you will have a meltdown, which can end catastrophically for any power plant. There are several safety measures in place in modern power plants that prevent these kinds of massive, devastating explosions, but not a lot of power plants get updated frequently, and unfortunately, as a result, it leads to greater and greater risk over time. However, there is a solution. We're at a day when nuclear fusion, the other kind of nuclear reaction, is becoming more viable. Unfortunately, there are certain risks to any kind of nuclear reaction, such as the release of radiation. Now, radiation is somewhat a misunderstood concept. Technically, we're being irradiated constantly by the nuclear fusion reaction in the sky that we call the sun, but nuclear fusion or any kind of radiation can lead to mutations. Now, unfortunately, mutations are a fact of life. We need some kind of shielding in order to prevent the risk of mutations. The greater risk is always going to be the heat output, risk of meltdown. But mutations are still a concern for a lot of people. Um, but that's not, I don't want to be all doom and gloom here because there are a lot of benefits to using any kind of nuclear energy, and especially the upcoming nuclear fusion energy. Now, we've spent a lot of time working on nuclear fusion energy in order to make it more viable, and one of the reasons it isn't very viable so far is because, as I've said previously, it does take a lot of energy to start up. In order to start a nuclear fusion reaction, you need a lot of plasma, which is what you're looking at right now. It's lightning, fire, all of that, that's plasma. You need a lot of plasma in order to get the reaction going. You need the plasma to move around quite a bit. This requires some powerful magnets, and you also need significant shielding. So there are a lot of problems just getting nuclear fusion to work properly. That said, as I've mentioned before, it is the energy that powers our sun. So it is short of a matter antimatter reaction. It is one of the most efficient and powerful and energy dense reactions in our universe that we know of so far. Um, and this is why we absolutely need to go for it. We're currently in laboratories working on what's called a tokamak arc reactor, modeled after the design you see in Iron Man, or attempting to achieve some level of that. Let me quickly explain the way I say quickly. Let me explain as briefly as I can the way that nuclear fusion works, and you might begin to see why it can be so powerful. Now, normally inside the core of an atom, protons, because they're both positively charged, will repel each other, but there is another fundamental force of the universe, the strong nuclear force, which will allow them to attract each other once they get close enough. And that's the challenge of nuclear fusion reaction. Once you can get two protons to overcome the power of electromagnetism and collide with each other, you've instigated a fusion reaction. The amount of energy released from the difference between the electromagnetic reaction and the strong nuclear reaction is incredible. Um, it would be enough to power robots, spaceships, satellites, you name it. Is the energy of the future. Um, as I've said before, there's really not much more efficient energy out there besides matter antimatter collisions, combining atoms made of protons and electrons with those made of antiprotons and positrons. Um, but of course, this kind of energy can be dangerous. Not as much for the world unless people are actively making weapons out of it, but it can be dangerous to the individual human without proper shielding. Um, that said, I see the future of nuclear energy as being very bright. I foresee the colonization of the stars, and that is a beautiful concept. So, those are just a few of the reasons why I support the progress of nuclear energy. Thank you.